much. Yes, here we go. Okay, let's do it. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for watching all of us again. So, as I mentioned before on the channel, we have some super exciting updates. And today we are going to have a chat with all of the members, key members of the COVERSE. And we are going to have some small chat about basically how did we get to know each other, how did we form the organization, and maybe some of the next actions. So please, let's introduce, I don't know, just whoever wants to start first. Naomi, Rado, go ahead.
You go, Rob.
All right, I'll go. So my name's Rado. So my background is rocket science and hypersonics for anyone who wants to get technical. And for the last 15, 20 years, I've been working to help science organizations all around the world do big science projects in all areas. So I got injured by the Pfizer vaccine about 14 months ago, and with long vax reaction, neurological, heart pain, muscle twitching, the whole works. And once I pulled myself out of the worst of it, I just got mad and found myself talking to a journalist for News Corp, and he published that article at news.com.au, and that's sort of where my journey really started with advocacy. And people came out of the woodwork. Hundreds and hundreds of people contacted me from all over Australia. A lot of professional people who previously had nowhere and no one to talk to, and you know, a number of people said, what can we do? How are we going to make this better? How can we make sure this never happens again? And I just realized, look, we need to do something, you know, and if I'm not seeing anyone else at the moment doing anything, so, you know, whoever wants to join me, we need to do it. And we connected with it. And that's how I met Nick. Nick was one of those people who reached out to me, and he said, yeah, I'm on board. So that's sort of where I started from. And Naomi, actually, somebody else connected me to Naomi. Was one of the other people that was in that initial group of that became COVERSE. And I just said, do you know anyone else? And she said, yeah, there's this lady Naomi from one of the support groups. She sounds pretty reasonable. So, all right, yeah, bring her along, and just fantastic to have Naomi with us as well. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Naomi. I guess very similar to Rado, was injured by my second Pfizer vaccination back in October 2021, so 14 months ago. I actually developed pericarditis. So my very first symptom was pericarditis. It was diagnosed in hospital. And I guess from my experience, I was very naive. I expected that I would just get better. The doctors told me, you know, it'd be mild. I'd be well within 3 weeks, just to rest, take some Nurofen, and I would be fine. And I just expected that would be the case. But it wasn't. I degenerated at such a rate that I work as a software, very similar to Nick, I guess, but more on the business side. So I manage very large software projects for a lot of the very large Australian organisations, and have done for the last 20 years. And obviously relies very, very heavily on my brain. And my brain just wasn't up to anything by sort of January 2022. So I stood down voluntarily, really, from my contract, and I haven't been able to work full time since then. So I guess my symptoms are I had pericarditis, had extreme fatigue. And it's not, fatigue isn't even a word to describe how tired I was. It was like walking through jelly. I don't know, it's really, really hard as a symptom to explain in a normal context. You just can't. I had a very weird reaction. So for me, mine's cyclical. So I had pericarditis, and then it developed into neurological issues as well. And we're seeing that really commonly, where people start with something and then something else comes along. So I've had pretty much the full gambit now. So I've had pericarditis, I've had neuropathy, where the left side of my body went completely numb. Thankfully it's starting to return now, but the left side of my face drooped. I lost all sensation, and I developed tinnitus, and I lost some feeling, I guess, in my feet and my hands. I also have internal tremors, so where your body just goes into this crazy shaking. I don't know what it is. It just is something that you can't stop. And my body temperatures were all over the place. So at one point I was 31 degrees and I couldn't get my body any warmer than that. And I live in a very warm part of Australia. So yeah, it's been pretty traumatic. Very similar to Rado. I at first thought I was the only person in the history of Australia who'd actually had a reaction. And the way I guess I've contacted with people is again through Facebook. I joined a international pericarditis group and found some Australians in that group. We formed an Australian pericarditis and myocarditis support group, and that I'm an admin in that group, and we have, I think, upwards of 600 or 700 people now in that group, and they're very heavily vetted, so we know that they are, people who are suffering pericarditis or myocarditis. And it's just been so disappointing to see how different the narrative is to media. So I guess we all read that it's young men, sorry Nick, that are affected by pericarditis and myocarditis, and that's generally not the case in the support groups. And it could be that, middle-aged people are using Facebook, but generally we're seeing a majority of women, and the majority are very severe cases. So most people are being injured for a very long period of time. So sorry, yeah, I've just rambled completely about what's happened, but yeah, that's been the last 14 months or so. Back to you.
That's what you talked there about that profile. It's not young men, even though there are a lot of young men too, but it's not the dominant profile, and it's not short-lived. And that's a reality that I don't know why it is, but the government is simply refusing to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And it's not just here in Australia; it's all around the world, isn't it? It's
exactly.
our messaging is, oh, these side effects are extremely rare. Nonsense. They're not that rare. And they're short-lived, which is again nonsense. Most of them aren't. If you've had heart inflammation, sure, the inflammation may come down, but you're now left with some ongoing complications at best, and at worst you develop what you've developed, all these neurological issues and everything else. So
I don't know anyone who's just had pericarditis or myocarditis through this. It's it's the combination of everything plus neurological. So it's we've got a constellation of symptoms, and it's quite confronting.
Yeah. So Nick, when we started COVERSE, we all had big visions about what we wanted to do. For you, what do you think is the most important thing that COVERSE has done so far and will do in the near future?
That's a great question, Rado. So I think number one problem that we are facing is the misinformation, because everything, like the whole process of getting all of the vaccines, feels like it was all crammed together. People didn't really know what to expect from that. So I just say the number one thing that we are trying to improve is the awareness of the situation, because for many people that got it completely symptom free, they are not aware that such a huge problem actually exists. And again, thanks to everyone in the COVERSE, we are trying to publish material, we are trying to get all of the sources, we are trying to connect people. We have quite a few of members that already posted what's happening to them from the symptomatics, etc. So and at some point in future, I think we can definitely reuse all of this data to help with the research on top of that. Because how many people do we have already assigned with the symptoms reports and so on?
So we've when people join up on our website, we give them the option to fill out an injury profile, and I'd love. I know that there's got to be many hundreds, if not thousands, of people who could fill out valuable information in Australia.
Yeah.
Now at the moment we've got less than 100 who have registered. Already it's showing some really interesting insights. It sort of matches a little bit what other surveys around the world are showing, but we really need several hundred people to fill out that profile to make the statistics more robust. So anybody reading this, if you're an Australian injured person, jump on our website and register yourself there, fill out the injury profile. It might take you a little while, but you can save it, you can come back to it. One of the very fascinating facts at the moment, this touches on what we've already spoken about, is the average time for people to begin to see any improvement. Now, some people improve after a few weeks. Some people after 18 months, they're still really bad, but the average time to see any improvement is 8 months. That, like, for me, it was about 3 months, I think. And I thought, surely by 3 months, most people are feeling better, but that's just not the case.
No,
It's
I was bang
completely.
on. Yeah, I was bang on 8 months as well before I started to have any improvement.
Yeah. See, and that's why our things like our survey there is just so important, and we need every injured Australian to fill that out, because that's information that the government is either not collecting, doesn't want to collect, or has got it and is lying about it. Whatever the reason is, we need to have that information so that we can start telling the truth about what is going on with the vaccine injured people in Australia.
Exactly. So if you're watching this and if you're from Australia, please go on our website and try to fill the form, because hopefully we are gonna have at least maybe another 150 in total, 200 people in a few months. And yes, definitely. Oh yeah, so definitely misinformation is number one problem. But for you, one of the questions I think lots of people are interested would be, what was the most shocking part that you discovered for yourself after it happened? So what is something that you were so confident that will not happen, but you started to realize that, oh, it's actually not that good and there is no help or something like this? What's your experience?
I can go. So I have three. My very first one was, so based on my background, like, we roll out very large technology projects. We have huge amount of infrastructure set up ready for things to go wrong. So my expectation was that, if this goes live, there would be, scores of people ready if something were to go wrong. So I had my adverse reaction. I went to hospital. It was diagnosed. So it was all very, I guess, what you would expect the process to be, but then it just unraveled from there. So the hospital didn't report it to the TGA. I self-reported to the TGA. So I guess in terms of timelines, I went to hospital, then I went to GP the next day. GP also didn't report. So I self-reported to the TGA. And then I just expected, I was so naive, I just expected people, I would get in, there would just be like a mass of people and they would want to know exactly what had happened. And, and I didn't meet the profile. I was a middle-aged woman who had pericarditis, and that was nowhere in the literature. So that was probably the very first thing where I thought, what the hell is going on? The second was the lack of medical support. So even though pericarditis is kind of touted as being a known issue, there was nothing. So there was no guidelines. There was an Otago, pamphlet that my doctor had. He had no idea. He'd never treated pericarditis before in his life. And his very first words to me were, you shouldn't have this because you're a woman. And then the second thing was, well, it's probably lucky you got this from the vaccine, because if you got COVID, it'd probably be worse. And at that, my husband had just carried me pretty much into his surgery. So it was not the best thing that had ever happened to me in my life, that's for sure. And the third thing really has been, did I do the second thing? Anyway, the third thing has been the lack of compensation and the roadblocks that we hit. People are losing their houses. I can say for myself, I'm at the moment going through like a financial analysis of what this has cost me. So far, it's over $260,000. So that is extreme, I know, but that I'm just a drop in the ocean of how much this is costing people. And that's just financially, emotionally, mentally, there's nothing. And I think that's what was so important to me from why I joined COVERSE, was I wanted people to know that they weren't alone, that there were people that were trying to do better for them, and that it wasn't just, we've been so relegated by so many different parts of the media where, you know, we're all crazy and we're all anti-vaxxers and we're all conspiracy theorists, and none of us are those people, and we're all just normal average people, and I just don't think the mainstream know that. So yeah, that was my 3 issues. Sorry. I'm very wordy tonight.
Well, that sounds, yeah, horrible. That sounds horrible. How about you, Rado?
Yeah, similar. So I had a reaction after my first shot, which was not extreme, but it was worrying. I had continual headaches and a whole bunch of other little symptoms, you know, but they weren't worrying because they're the type of things I have had after a flu shot occasionally. And my doctor assured me, yes, it's safe to go and get the second shot. On reflection now, and this shocks me looking back in reflection, at the time I wasn't worried about it, but now knowing that my doctor told me to go and have the second shot, and that it was safe to have the second shot, and that this has happened to so many other people that had a reaction and were told a second shot would be okay. It has shocked me at how, I guess, naive a lot of the medical profession were. I don't necessarily blame them because they were dealing with information that was either incomplete or incorrect from the authorities.
Yeah.
And there's probably very few doctors out there who would look at any one of us who've had a reaction and say to us, geez, that's a worry. You probably shouldn't have another shot. Every specialist I've seen since, they've all said, you need to go and have a booster now. It's like, man, seriously?
Yeah.
I took myself to hospital on 4 occasions. It would have been more if I thought it would help.
Yeah.
And with worrying chest pain and a whole bunch of other things, and you're saying it's safe for me to go and have another shot. I mean, and the trajectory I've learnt since is if somebody has a bad reaction, their next one is most likely going to be worse, and any subsequent ones will be worse again. And for so much of the medical profession to still not see this is a shock, an absolute shock. So that was something that I can look back and reflect on. That was the first shocking thing. The second one was exactly what Naomi pointed out. You know, I thought, this has happened to me. It's serious. It's now, you know, as it goes on, the more weeks and months it goes on, you think this is definitely out of the ordinary because I haven't heard of this happening. So somebody's going to pay attention. Well, no one paid attention. You know, and I thought I had a lot of faith in our scientific institutions. I have a strong background in science, and the way those scientific institutions advise government, because I have been involved in some of those discussions with different topics, and it's just no one was interested. You know, I reached out to a lot of my friends in the scientific community who are in sort of medical research areas, and whilst they didn't have anything that could help me specifically, they spoke to vaccine experts. You know, I spoke to one of the most you know, influential science bodies in Australia, and a number of good friends there who reached out to their entire network of vaccine experts and COVID experts. And I thought, gee, someone's going to come back to me and say, this is really interesting. Let's bring you into the lab. Let's do a whole bunch of blood work. Let's do some biopsies, whatever we need to do. We're going to see what's going on here. You know, whether they thought it was a vaccine reaction or not, but no one did. All I got back was, no, the vaccine can't cause that. I couldn't believe it. I mean, these people call themselves scientists. You know, it was to be so badly gaslit by people that I thought were rational and open-minded and had a scientific inquiry about them. I just couldn't believe it. And luckily, as we've gone on, I have found some really good scientists had some good discussions with people here in Australia. Nobody's actually doing anything, but I've had some really good dialogues with some overseas researchers who are actually putting some rubber to the road, and setting up some infrastructure to do some proper analysis of what's been happening to us all. So so that was the other big thing that really shook me, and it just sort of made me realize just how a lot of people use the word captured. I'm not sure that's the right word, but how enamored all levels of society have been with this idea of we have to do everything against COVID and we don't care the consequences. And it's almost like that. And when people like us have had serious consequences, people are just so stuck in their bubble that no, those consequences are not real. We don't want to know about it, you know. And it's really been quite, you know, upsetting that we did the right thing. We, well, when governments and medical professionals and all sorts of people said, go out and get vaccinated, to, if not for yourself, to protect your loved ones, to protect your community, you know. So we all did that. And then when it went wrong, it was like, no, didn't happen to you. You're lying. You're an anti-vaxxer, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And if I add a fourth, it's the censorship. That has been an absolute complete shock to me. Obviously, we cannot get media coverage at all. And that has been a huge shock. So yeah, I mean, this is a huge story. It has so many levels to it, and no one's willing to peel back the onion and work out what's really gone on. It's, yeah, that has been another very big shock.
Yeah.
How about you, Nick?
Yeah, one thing that like it all repeats again was for me, to be honest, like right now the craziest part when I hear all of this again, because of course I heard it multiple times, but even during this session, that doctors, even knowing that something went wrong, blindly asking to go for the second.
Yeah.
That was absolutely shocks, because you already feel bad. Something went wrong. Like it's almost like you took a poison or peanut butter when you have an allergy, and someone tells you no, but you have to go for the next one, because like it's ridiculous. And this is something that you don't expect from the person with the occupation that is aimed to help you. That was like, if you knew that, I don't know, like I feel like every single person that got the second shot because of the doctors pushing it that hard, well, that's a crime. That's a real crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now looking forward and maybe trying to think about some more hopeful aspects to this. Out of everything you guys have experienced and learnt, what do you think is, if we look maybe a year or two down the track, what do you hope will be a positive outcome from our activities and our discussions and our efforts?
Go ahead, Naomi.
Okay. I guess for me, one is, I guess, acknowledgement. So we need people to acknowledge that this has happened, and the rate at which it's happened needs to be acknowledged. And from that, we can start to move forward to do things like research, get treatment for people. We can have people not be gaslit. We can have people actually start to be compensated, or at least have support or financial support for themselves. We have got people sleeping in their cars. We've got people living on the streets because they can't afford to, you know, anything. And it's just horrendous. We've got, you know, people doing GoFundMe pages to try and fund their medical treatment. It just astounds me that as a country we've let this happen. So yeah, for a year or two, I'm hoping that everyone's recovered. Obviously, having a global network where everyone is experimenting on themselves is a good thing and a bad thing. But hopefully, you know, between us all, we can actually come up with things that help. I feel like we're getting closer and closer to at least some things that are helping people. So yeah, in a year or two, I'm really hoping we're on a very strong path to recovery and people can move forward in a positive way.
How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I completely share the view of Naomi completely. So it's interesting. Like, I would really hope that something that everyone just looks at you as you're crazy will be accepted in future. So it's the stage when, to be honest, everything looks like a matrix. It's like a software where we got sucked because of some kind of bug in the logic, and everyone thinks that we are crazy, but it actually happens. So people don't believe until it happens to them. And pointing this one, I definitely want COVERSE to get this global awareness of the problem, just to make sure that people know that it happens. It happens much more than it's been advertised. The consequences are much, much worse than any of the infographics shows from official government medias. Second one definitely would be to facilitate some kind of research that would help other people, because it's good to have the media impact, but if we already, like right now, we're already gathering some data from other injured people, and we can compile some reports, and we can supply these reports to other organizations, medical organizations that are trying to understand what's the problem, like is it autoimmune disease or the impact of the spike protein, whatever. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to touch all of this because I know it's going to get a huge backslash, since you need to talk only about things that you know. And yeah, just overall for the future, again, COVERSE can actually expand from not the all of the situation with the COVID could be a base, the reason for all of us to come together. And we don't know in future there could be much more pandemics or something else, and we are going to see multiple times the same story, but with a different virus and with the different companies pushing different medications. Yeah. How about you, Rado?
Yeah, I mean, I echo all of those sentiments as well. Maybe another thing I'd like to see change, and I hope that we can help shift the narrative, is that that the way people talk about things like vaccine reactions. And I mean, censorship is one thing, but for the whole, almost the whole society to turn their back on us, and it's not because they're bad people, but it's because the whole environment has been created with the help of pharma, with the help of governments, with the help of many scared people around the pandemic, and sort of created this black hole almost, where all rational thought got sucked in, and people got stuck there. And so I'd like to be able to reach a point where we can openly, freely, and rationally talk about vaccine reactions and other things as well. Like at the moment, just with COVID, there are many people out there who are immunocompromised, who are scared stupid because of the winding back of restrictions, and those changes in policy and public health measures has meant those people have felt far more vulnerable to normal life, and they're being gaslit by government. So I'd like to see where we can have rational conversations about these types of issues, and where we can say, I've had a vaccine reaction, and people saying, geez, tell me all about it, rather than going, no, you didn't, you're a liar. And so we have to reach a certain point. And I think through the type of data that we're wanting to put together, and hopefully the research along the way, just that weight of evidence, and slowly as that comes out into the public, it will help snap people out of this trance that they've all been in, to realize, okay, it's not a one line response. It's this is a very nuanced situation, requires a bit of thought, a bit of discussion, and certainly a lot of compassion. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, completely agree. So, well, basically that was our first introduction of all of the members. I mean, these are some of the members of the COVERSE. We have much more. So, like all of you, you are going probably see Rado, Naomi sharing their story, and again, maybe covering some other research and what we are doing. Because as I said, the channel expands completely to COVERSE, so that we have much more material, much more information, news. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to drop in down below. And again, we keep this session fairly short for the first time, so that we have lots of other things we are going to cover in future. So yes, what do you think?
Awesome.
Awesome, awesome.
Right.
So yeah, thank you everyone. And until we are going to have another interview with another news, or you're gonna see all of us separated together, new, old people. So all right, see you everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.